At Subway, start your day the flavorful way by adding new guacamole to your favorite breakfast sandwich. Perfectly made with a hint of jalapeno, our guacamole turns up the flavor to your breakfast. Try it today on a hot and toasty egg, white, and cheese. Subway, eat fresh.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. We're taping this on a Tuesday. Not sure when we're running it yet. On the phone right now, the guy who runs the Boston Celtics, a two-time world champion, Danny Ainge. How are you?
Good. Bill, how's it going?
How is the, can we call it a rebuilding project? Do you bring like your construction gear to work every day to rebuild things? What's going on?
I don't know. I think it's sort of a new team, a younger, more athletic team, but I don't know what it's going to look like yet. We have some good core pieces that we really like, lots of draft picks over the next few years, and we'll see what happens.
How fast did that Nets trade happen from beginning to end? Like how many days was that from when you knew it was a possibility to when it was completed?
Well, it's like a lot of trades happen. It evolved with a conversation about something completely different into a bigger deal. And something that I really didn't think that would happen, simply because it takes sort of a special, unique circumstance in order for a trade like that to go through. And the tax ramifications of Brooklyn are, I would call, unique. In today's day and age, and in the NBA right now with the new CBA, and but a team that was really going for it, and money was not an object, and that was probably the reason why we got a better offer today than we would have even gotten 2 or 3 years ago. Right.
Well, at what point? You're talking about trading a guy, Paul Pierce, who's been on the team for 15 seasons, who's going to get his number retired, who's one of the 5 or 6 best Celtics ever. And then KG, who's one of the top 25 players ever, who, reinvented his career in Boston and ended up getting a ring and was beloved by the fans. At what point do you bring those guys into the conversation?
When we feel like that there is a deal there, that both teams are seriously interested. I think that KG had a no trade clause in his contract, Bill, so I think that he would have had to be involved of anything and had to get his approval. And we knew that, and New Jersey knew that. And Paul, we wanted to do right by Paul, just because of what he's done for our franchise. And we also have a responsibility of doing what's best for the Celtic fans, people that follow our team day in and day out. And this was a tough enough of getting rid of what you just classified as 2 Hall of Fame Celtic retired jerseys in the rafters, and 2 real big-time players that we're very fortunate to have watched over the last 6 years, and Paul for 15. So I think that they didn't know about it until later, but I also think that that Paul has a connection with just having the same agent as Darren Williams and Jason Kidd.
Yep.
And
Jeff Schwartz.
I think that there probably was some discussion going on there. I don't know that for sure, but my guess is that they had some conversation about it. I know that Paul was the one who talked KG into, wanting to do the deal or letting go of his no trade clause to make the deal happen. And that took some convincing to do.
And Kevin's not a guy who loves change. I mean, he's probably stayed in Minnesota 2 extra seasons than he should have, because he just is a loyal guy who likes his routine and doesn't like to leave situations. Did you think there was any point where he was going to say, you know what, I want to retire here, I want my title here, and no thanks, I'm going to stay? Yeah,
I thought that was possible, and I'd have been okay with that. He had earned that right. in my opinion. So if that had happened, I'm okay with that. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett on your team. They're great players and great Celtics, and they can be great influences on our young players as they are trying to develop. And I think that Kevin also wanted to win, and I think that when it came down to it, I think that Paul going was a huge help, and Jason Terry going was a huge help. Two guys that KG truly respects, and I think the Jason kid coaching. Jason has just been through playing basketball in his late 30s up to 40, and what he has just gone through, I think that he was probably able to tell KG that this will, I've been through this. I know how the body is, and I won't wear you out. I'll save you for the important times of the season. And I think that was probably intriguing to KG. Of course, this is all speculation on my part, but I'm guessing that those conversations were happening.
Well, you guys had a feeling, I'm sure, that KG at this point in his career was probably a 25 minutes a game type of player just because of the miles that he has on his body. He's not somebody you want playing in back-to-backs or 4 games of 5 nights if the goal is to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So, from the Celtics vantage point, once Doc was out the door, it wouldn't have made a ton of sense to keep everybody involved. But I'm guessing the hardest part for you was Paul Pierce in 15 years and whether he deserved the right to retire as a Celtic or not. What was your process with that?
Yeah, I think that's true. That we never really we had serious conversations about Paul maybe back in 2006 or 2007, and that's really the only time we've ever really had any serious conversations with Paul.
Was Portland, right, in the Chris Paul, Darren Williams draft? 2005.
Yeah. Okay,
right.
2005 draft. And you're much more of a historian than I am, Bill. I can tell you that. But anyway, he is. But Paul has really been a great Celtic, a winner. He's been unbelievable, and I think that him and KG, the combination of those two, were just what the other one needed. KG needed a go-to type of scorer, a guy that was a great scorer, and Paul needed someone that could defend and rebound and help and unselfish, that could take a little bit of the scoring burden off of him. And I just think it came to the point where those guys, as the best two players on a team, aren't going to go very far. Those guys, as a third and fourth or fourth and fifth, however you look at it, are pretty dang good still. And I think New Jersey is going to have a terrific team next year.
I voted for Paul for third-team All-NBA forward. I thought he was terrific. Really, from the point Rondo went down through the end of the season, I thought he was outstanding, and it was some of the best all-around basketball he's played. And now he's, I think he ran out of gas in the playoffs, and the reasons are pretty simple. You look at how San Antonio uses Tim Duncan, and they're spotting him. They're playing him 28 minutes a game, getting him some rest. The Celtics had to play Paul Pierce 37, 38 minutes a game, and I thought he ran out of gas. But the interesting part for me was what he said. He kept it close to the vest for the most part with the trade. He didn't seem too bitter about it. But there wasn't one interview with Jack McMullen where he said, I look at Dirk and Dallas, and I look at Kobe and the Lakers and Duncan and the Spurs, and those teams make a point of saying they're never going to trade those guys. Those are their guys. I felt like I had earned that in Boston. You obviously felt differently, but when you hear him say that, what is your reaction?
Well, I also heard him say that if I were the GM, which he wants to be someday, I would have done the same thing.
Right. He was all over the map.
Right. But, so it's a hard call. It's a really hard call. And I think that it speeds up our process a little bit more. I think for what's best for the Boston Celtics is what's really important. And Paul has earned the right to be remembered as one of the great Celtics of all time. I'm not sure that that's what's in the best interest of the Celtics. And I've stated that before, and that has nothing to do that we like them less. Is keeping all those other guys around the best thing for those franchises? I don't know. That's a debate that you guys have in the media and fans like to have. And what I believe is that you have to move forward, and if you get value in return, then great. If you don't get value in return, then they finish Celtics.
Well, and let's give this some background. One of the reasons you feel this way, and this has been discussed, but I wanted to bring this up in the podcast, is in the late 80s, you felt like the Bird-McHale Parrish nucleus got a little bit old. They stayed with everybody too long. And what you ended up being the fall guy. You were the guy who ended up getting traded to the Kings for Ed Pinckney and Joe Klein, which they were hoping would give them the young legs. The trade didn't totally work. But you were watching that whole situation, and it seems like that's colored the way you've run the Celtics these last few years. Is that fair?
Well, and the thing is that the NBA is different now. There's a lot of differences in the NBA now as then. But I thought that at the time, Larry wasn't Larry of 1986, and Kevin wasn't Kevin of 1986. That's why I think the Celtics of 1986 were the best team of all time, because those two guys in particular were right in the middle of their prime.
Yep.
And domination. And by 1989, when they had traded me away, it wasn't. I was glad to be traded. I was happy. It was a great thing for me to go play for Portland and get to the finals and play for Phoenix on those good teams. We had a chance to win all 3 of the years that I played for Phoenix. We were in the hunt had it not been for injuries, so it was a good thing for me. I was grateful for that experience, as I saw from a distance, as those guys were not even close to the same players that they were when I had the chance to play with them, and was so grateful to play with them in the early 80s and mid 80s. So I just always felt like that. I mean, the offers that they had for those guys, and right now it's a different world. I mean, in that world, there were franchises on the verge of, extinction almost, and they needed ticket sales, and Larry Bird going back to Indiana was going to bring back a pretty darn good package, and Kevin McHale going to Dallas was going to bring back, some really nice, young, fresh talent. And
I think that was that Shrimp and Perkins for McHale. I think that was on the table.
Shrimp and Perkins and something else even, I think. And they were young and just up and coming. And Larry, I think it was Chuck Person and Stepanovich and Herb Williams. And I mean, there was a lot there for guys that were sort of on their way out, and but that it's a different time now. I mean, you rarely see that. Right now, there's a lot of teams that are trying to get younger, and half the teams in the league, their main objective is not winning a championship this year, but to accumulate assets and move forward. And everybody wants to be that team that is, in the hunt for a championship every year, and we hope to be able to rebuild to be that team.
Yeah, I'm torn on the late 80s because, first of all, I think Bird is untouchable. You can't trade him. Like, if you have one of the top 10 players ever, I think that guy, you keep him and you try to figure out the rest of the roster. The McHale trade really would have made a difference. Perkins and Shrimp, little young blood, all that stuff. Plus, he had the broken foot from the 87 playoffs. He was never quite the same after that. But just as a fan, I'm glad they kept them together. And then 91 and 92 teams with Reggie Lewis, they were in the mix. They were on the fringe of making the finals both of those years. Bird broke down. But, I see it from your side.
But they were never the same. Never.
No, they were never the same. I agree.
They were in 84, 85, 86.
No question.
Even 87 was an injury-packed year for the Celtics, but I would disagree, and I'm not so sure. And I just think that Bird come on, like Larry's one of the greatest players ever, and he's either the first or second best Celtic in the history of the great tradition of the Celtics.
Yeah.
But I just am not sure. I mean, had Reggie Lewis situation not happened and Len Bias, I mean, maybe it's different. Maybe those guys sort of continue the great tradition and winning ways, and Larry can play a lesser role as he got older instead of still having to be Larry, who he was. He wasn't the guy that was the MVP of the league, who was one of the best players that the league has ever seen in the middle of his prime.
But let's be honest, though. No GM would have had the balls to trade Larry Bird from Boston. I mean, the guy was a borderline religious figure, especially in the late 80s. And I remember, even that the season when you got traded and he was supposedly coming back and he had the surgery on both heels, like people just assumed he was going to play until he was 50 because it was almost irrational how much confidence everybody had in him. I don't think they ever could have traded him. I really feel like there would have been a riot. I think it would have been Faneuil Hall. I think cars would have been overturned. But, you mentioned Len Bias, which is a topic that I still bring up, even though he'd be in his 50s now. But I think that's the fork in the road moment for that Celtics team because McHale and Bird just don't have to play the same minutes if he's on the team. And you're adding Len Bias, who was the best college player, to, as you said, the best team of all time. That's at least 2 or 3 more titles, I'm thinking. Right?
Right. I think so. I definitely agree with that. And Kevin and Larry don't have to be, MVP type players at that stage of their career. If you have those young players, and then Reggie turned out to be a great draft pick, and Reggie was a fantastic player and still coming into his prime.
Let's go back to what happened this summer because Paul, I think we both agree he's one of the 5 or 6. You'd put him in the top 5 or 6 Celtics ever, right? I
do, yeah. Just because he's such a great and consistent and durable offensive player. Guys that can finish games and score, and the likes of Game 7, 40, whatever, 42, 41, 42 points. I think Paul is one of the best offensive Celtics of all time.
Yeah. I'm going to miss watching him. I think the cool thing about his career was he had a lot of success early. And then, he got afflicted by some of the things that happened to a lot of the guys from his generation. He made a lot of money, had a lot of power. Some stuff went to his head. I don't think he handled some things that well. And then after the 2005 playoffs, when you almost traded him. But he came back that next year. It was the best all-around season of his career. He was playing on a bad team, and he was brilliant that whole season. And from that point on, you can't argue with one moment that he had as a Celtic. And it just goes to show you, like bringing it around with the trading thing, you see teams give up on young players so often, right? And you were really almost ready to trade him that summer. Now, if you got Chris Paul back, maybe not a disaster.
So that's a big factor. Paul Pierce for Chris Paul. It wasn't like we were trying to trade. I love Chris Paul. I think he's a terrific player.
Right. But you think like how many teams have given up on a young player when have gotten to that point and regretted it, and you kept Pierce. Now, Pierce versus Chris Paul, it's pretty interesting. It certainly would have pushed the team in a different direction, but I think this is one of the times it was good to keep him. But we got to talk about right after the season. I think, something that pushed you toward making all these moves was the fact that you didn't know if your coach was coming back. And now Doc Rivers coaches the Clippers. Obviously, there's people have said different things about what the reasons were. And I was the one who brought up that he quit on the team. I felt like he did to some degree. He took umbrage with that. We had a good conversation about it. In retrospect, are you disappointed with how that those 5-6 weeks after the season, with how that played out?
Well, listen, I thought Doc would be our coach for a long time. And, there's been, when Doc signed his new contract, we'd even talked about him being Jerry Sloan and Greg Popovich and, breaking Red Auerbach's all-time record as a Celtic coach. And we knew that our guys were getting older, but we thought that this time might come. So I had anticipated Doc being around for a long time. I never had any idea that that he would want out, but I understand it. And, I understand the Clippers have much more to offer right now than we do on the court. I just thought that Doc wanted to continue to participate with me and Wick and Pags and continuing to try to rebuild this thing as we had done before. At the same time, I do understand that that's not fun, and that's not fun on coaches. So,
right.
I think that once Doc made that clear that that was something that he was interested in or wanted to do, I think we had a very rational and reasonable conversation, and if there could be a situation that would work for everybody, that we would consider doing that. And that's when we started that conversation, when he let it be known that that was something that he would consider, and that he didn't really have a desire to rebuild.
So we're talking like second week of May. You find out from Doc that he doesn't want to come back, or that he's leaning toward maybe not coming back, and you guys are all surprised. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, he's contemplating broadcasting. He's contemplating coaching the Clippers and coaching the Celtics. He's considering all of those at that time. I think he was not certain, but I think that his preference at that point would be to coach the Clippers.
This was even
a bright young team.
Even in early May, that was on the table?
I think that in early May, I don't remember the dates still.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what dates, but when I thought Doc was coming back. He most years contemplates what he's going to do, and if he needs to take a year off or whatever. But this year was getting long, and we were trying to figure out what direction we were going, and he was very uncertain. But we eventually did have a talk about seeing if we could work something out. We were not going to let him out of his contract and just let him go coach wherever he wanted. Right. And we were going to hold him to his contract, and then after that, we had a discussion and a meeting. Doc and I have a good relationship, and he did express his interest in coaching the Clippers or looking into that possibility.
Well, that's one of the fascinating things about this whole story for me is you guys are legitimately good friends, and this is something you guys are in dialogue for 7 weeks, right? About this, you guys, this is your buddy, and now he's thinking, I'm not sure I want to still be a part of this, but he's also your friend,
right? But it's and I'll always be a friend of Doc's, and I'll always be grateful for what Doc has done for us. I saw a guy work here for 9 years, and I saw him give everything he had. He coached. I think one of his greatest strengths is his stamina, how he bounces back after difficult times and difficult stretches. I mean, he has amazing stamina, and he's a leader. And I'll always be grateful for what he gave the Celtics in his time here. And, Doc and I were business partners as I look at it. We played golf together. We weren't best friends. We didn't agree on everything all the time, but we usually agreed. Philosophically, I think we agreed a lot more usually when it came down to discussions, it wasn't philosophical. It was just a conclusion. But, he had a chance to go to the Clippers and make all the decisions on the basketball side. And have a fantastic young nucleus.
Well, that's the part, and this is why, I said what I said. I felt like I just wish he had said, and I told him this, I just wish he had said, I wanted to change the scenery. I wanted to coach Chris Paul. I wanted to live in LA. I wanted to be in control of the personnel decisions. Like, I don't think any Celtic fan would have begrudged him of that, but it seems like he genuinely feels, and he said this publicly, that part of this for him was that it seemed like you guys wanted to move on too. And that's the part where, I don't know. I mean, do you feel like that's a fair comment to make?
No, that had never crossed my mind. Obviously, I look at coaches. I'm always paying attention to players and coaches everywhere I go, and there's guys that I'm impressed with. But like I said, I had anticipated Doc being our coach for a long time.
Right. And I think the Popovich thing is a fair comparison because, he's on that short list, and I think he's going to do a great job at the Clippers. I'll certainly be hoping he does well. He's always the guy who won the title in 2008. It is, I think the situation, it'll be interesting to see what the response is when he comes back. I think for the most part, Celtics fans seem like they're okay with it. The Brad Stevens thing was certainly very helpful. When did you know that was a possibility?
Well, first of all, I'll be the first one giving Doc a standing ovation.
Yep.
When he comes back. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. Like I said,
yeah, I hope he gets one.
The work that he, and I think our fans will appreciate all that he did here in Boston. And I don't look at it as quitting on the Celtics. And, I also think that, Brad is a terrific young up-and-coming coach, and we're very fortunate to have him. And Brad is a guy that I've just admired from a distance. I've watched his teams play. I've watched them execute. I've watched them compete with far less talent. I've always been impressed with his demeanor, his temperament on the court, and how he deals with the players and how he coaches forward. He's always been a very impressive coach in what he's accomplished. And I've talked with Brad almost each year. I call Brad and get his insight into players that they've played, players that he's recruited, players that he's known. I've always been very impressed with his insight into players and valued his wisdom on players that he knew.
And you think, obviously you gave him a 6-year contract, which is really long for it to be a coach. I don't even think I've ever heard of a 6-year.
Yeah, I don't think any other coach has. That was my selling point to Brad is how much we value him. And, no other coach has a 6-year contract.
Well, isn't part of that you want to make sure, look, if this season goes in the wrong direction for whatever reason, we don't want you to feel like there's some urgency here in year one. Like this is a long-term plan regardless of how this plays out. Is that fair? Yeah,
I think that the 6-year commitment might have made a difference. I'm not sure. I mean, Brad is not we never had a negotiation. His wife was his agent, and his wife wanted to understand the language in one paragraph that we explained to her, and that was basically the entire negotiation.
Wow.
And this was just about the challenge that Brad had to leave and the loyalty that he had to his athletic director, who gave him a shot as a 30-year-old coach of a Division I program, and the kids he was recruiting, and just the success and failures, mostly failures of college coaches coming to the NBA. And we talked through some of that, and I think Brad's different. And, we didn't want to make him think that he had to turn the world around in 1 year, and that this is a process, and that we do want to create and continue a Celtic culture and teach teach our young guys how to play, but how to win. There's a big difference of showing up to play and showing up to win. And Brad and I are on the same page on that.
I'm thinking like of the college coaches that didn't work when they came to the pros. And I was there. I went to probably 75% of the Pitino Celtic games. And I really think the biggest part of that problem, other than the fact that he just didn't know how to pace his players during the season, Pitino the GM killed Pitino the coach in a lot of ways. But I do feel like the biggest thing that hurt him was he was a celebrity. And he was this guy who was guaranteed this $50 million deal. And in a lot of ways, he was more famous than the players he was coaching. And I'm not sure that works in the NBA. And it seems like Brad Stevens is going to take it from a different angle. He doesn't want to be the focal point. He doesn't want to be the guy everybody talks about. Do you think that's accurate?
I think Rick Pitino was a fantastic coach. And I do think that, the contract and the pressure and his own expectations and the fans' expectations and just sort of I remember I was sitting with Kevin McHale when they announced the contract and taking over the Celtics. And, Kevin and I were even teasing him in the combine camp in Chicago a little bit that year. Right. Like, what have you done as a Celtic? How did you get this? And I don't know if Rick knew how to take that from us right now. We were just sort of teasing him. But I think he's a fantastic coach. And I do think that all of the fanfare and the expectations were out of control. And I think that he felt the pressure internally to be a savior of the Celtic franchise and to turn it around quickly. And I just think that's the wrong approach. And I just don't think you can do that. It's a big challenge, and it's hard work. The competition is getting greater. The general managers and the teams are getting smarter all the time, and people are seeing how teams do it. And I just think that you got to be patient and pick your spot and be opportunistic. And I feel like we have a great coach, and I really like what I've seen so far in these last 2 months. I'm excited for this season. Our players are excited. Working out here early in this, or before the season even starts, I think that they all sense his genuine, his integrity, his energy, and his intelligence. Yeah. I think they already appreciate that.
One of the things that you guys have, and I would say maybe 5 or 6 NBA teams have this, and that's it. And it seems like Brad Stevens is going to be the logical successor to Doc in this respect, because you guys all work so well together. You guys have a good ownership. You have a front office. Everybody knows their role, and then the coach. And it's that 3-pronged structure that I guess you'd call it maybe a backbone. But it's amazing to me how many franchises haven't figured out that that's the best way to do it. Why do you feel like the league's getting smarter as the decade progresses here, or that you're seeing a lot of teams make the same mistakes that we've seen for decades and decades?
Hey, listen, I think we all make some great decisions and some bad decisions, but I think it's imperative to have success long term. You need to be on the same page, and you need to have a good working relationship. And without question, our franchise starts with ownership, and I think they've done a great job, and they're good owners, and because they're smart and they let us do our jobs, and yet, their intelligence offers a lot. Their own perspective is very influential in what we do. And Wick and Pags and Irv are very instrumental in all the big decisions that we make, and have great insight and give great leadership to our franchise. And so I think that it always starts at the top, at ownership. And I think that my ability to get along with coaches and try to identify the real issues at hand and not the superficial things that can be corrected, that aren't working right in a team, but try to identify what the real ones are. That's my responsibilities, and give recommendations to ownership and what we need to do to fix those. But I think patience is huge, and trust. And I think Brad is in a good franchise that, we're not gonna jump all over our coach because he didn't call a timeout at the right time, or things that can be learned. He's really a smart guy, and I think he's going to be a fantastic coach, and we're going to give him a long time to prove, and we're all invested in him. And when we went to talk to Brad, we weren't sure if he would or wasn't going to leave Butler, and by the time we left his house, Wick and Pags were on the exact same page I was on. Matter of fact, by the time we had left their house, they were more excited about signing him than I was. And I was always excited or certain, but they were certain that he was the guy, and so he has our full support.
Well, I got to ask you about Rondo because, for one thing, do we know when he comes back? When do you think we will see him playing a regular season game for the Boston Celtics?
I'm not sure. Rondo was working out today with all the guys. He's not near 100% yet, but he's out doing shooting drills and ball handling drills. And but I really don't have a date yet. We want to be careful with him, obviously, but he's hungry and anxious, and I like the communication that's going on between him and Brad. I think Rondo is looking forward to this stage of his career. Obviously he has to get healthy, but I think he really likes the challenge that's ahead of him.
Do you feel like if he doesn't get hurt last year, that team makes the Eastern Finals?
It's hard to say. He's such a special player. He put us on his back in the series the year before against Miami, and we had a lot of injuries. Avery had an unbelievable season that year. And I think that, had we had Avery and in that series, things might have gone different. But, hey, injuries are part of the game, and I'm not sure it matters what we say about it. Rondo did get hurt. We didn't have him, and it put us behind the eight ball. And then even the backups, our team responded pretty well during the regular season. But, without losing Barbosa and Solinger, I thought were even just as devastating at the time to finish the regular season strong. But Rondo's such a special player. He's been MVP of playoff series against some of the best players in the world, including some of the Hall of Fame players he had on his own team. And so he's a very special player.
When you look back at that 6-year run from 08 to 13, it really seems like if you had a computer play that 6-year run 100 times, I feel like most of the time it would have resulted in more than one title. Do you look back? I know you're one of those look forward, I don't look back guys, but at the same time, you have to look back at that and think like, man, if only this had happened, this happened. You have KG in 09. Perkins gets hurt in Game 6 of 2010. You have Bradley goes down in 2012. Last year, Rondo. When you look back, what is the toughest what if for you?
Losing a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter of Game 7 of an NBA championship, I think, was probably the toughest. Because even though we weren't 100%, we didn't have Perkins, I thought that that was the best basketball that we played, actually. I would say that including 2008, I thought the best we played in this 6-year stretch was the Cleveland series and the Orlando series and the early part of the Lakers series of 2010. And maybe it was because expectations were low. We were 27-27 to finish the regular season. And yet, we get to Game 7 of the NBA Finals and a double-figure lead late in the third or early in the fourth. I don't remember exactly, but that was a tough one. In spite of the adversity that we had losing Perkins, I I still feel like that was a game that we should have won and we could have won, and we just didn't. Tough loss.
Yeah, I was going to say that the key to that game for me was Rasheed Wallace had to play 35 minutes. He probably had 24 good ones in him. And because of that Perkins, they there was no way to fill that extra 11 minutes. And the team ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, no question. There's also, we should mention, you're not allowed to talk about this, but there's a YouTube clip of all the calls that went against the Celtics in the second half of that game. I'm allowed to say that, you're not. But the refs might have helped out the Lakers. I still can't watch that game. That's probably I'm going to say the two toughest Celtics losses ever for me personally were that one and then Game 4 in 1987 against the Lakers, because Larry's shot, I still don't know how it didn't go in.
Right.
I mean, he missed it by like a centimeter, and it seemed like it was just dead on, and it was going to go in, and the roof was going to collapse, and the whole thing. And I'm still mad about it. I don't know if you have any feelings about it after all these years.
No, hey, listen, it's unfortunate that those painful ones last longer in your brain than the great victories.
Yeah.
But those are tough losses, and but I thought that year was the way our guys were playing. I mean, how we played Cleveland and Orlando, even to get to the Lakers, and then to have the lead against the Lakers, and get to a Game 7. That team was playing up to its potential. It was a team that sort of cruised through the regular season, and then they really turned it on in the playoffs. And Rasheed was a big part of that. Rasheed started playing well after having a subpar regular season. He started playing really well in the playoffs, and that really gave us a big boost. And we got really close, and that's never fun to get that close and lose.
When you look at Rondo going forward, you seem like you subscribe to the philosophy. If I have a blue chipper, I'm not trading the blue chipper unless I'm getting another blue chipper. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, like he's a special player, and there's always a lot of rumors about Rondo, and same thing. I mean, the same guy. I think Chris Paul was, and I told Rondo, I mean, we came close to getting Chris Paul for Rondo when Chris went to the Clippers, but we're not looking to trade Rondo. We think Rondo's a big part of our future.
So so that was accurate, that New Orleans trade, or the rumors?
There was discussion about us getting Chris Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can't talk about this, but I guess in terms of what New Orleans got, I probably would have rather had Rondo. I'm always going to go for the blue chipper over a package of decent guys and picks and what ifs and all that stuff. Quickly about the mid '80s Celtics. You said you thought the '86 Celtics were the best team ever. My favorite game from that whole run was the 25-0 stretch against Atlanta, which is on YouTube actually now, and is just about as devastating as you're ever going to see basketball played. What was it like to be in that game?
Well, I mean, it was our team. That was such a special team. I mean, when you go 50-1 at home in a season, I mean that's pretty devastating. When our team did have a tendency to get bored. I've told people a lot over the years. I mean, like we did blow a lot of leads, 20-point leads, and Larry's legendary trash talking wasn't as much as people think, but half the time I think he did it just because he was bored. Right. And he always wanted to challenge himself, but that team was a team that when I think could have beat anybody. You just had that feeling because Bird was so good and he was in the very prime of his career, and McHale was such a dominant player. You know, one of the top 3 or 4 low post players of all time, in my opinion, and still fresh and healthy, and a great defender, shot blocker. And then Parrish and DJ were still, really, really good players, and were not old. They were in their early 30s, I believe, and still playing at a very, very high level. And I was playing, at a high level for my career, just coming into my prime. So, and then, Walton was a huge part of that team, just his experience off the bench, Scott Wedman. I think Larry's still mad at Scott Wedman, who was the highest paid player in the league, I think, there for a stretch. when he came to the Celtics, he used to say something to Scotty every day at practice. I can't believe this guy's making more money than me. Uh-huh. But, Jerry Seasting, I just felt like our shooting, our intelligence, our rebounding, our ability to really defend when we needed to. It's a little bit different time than it is today, where teams, I think, focus on the defense more. Like our Celtics teams here, KG era, Paul Pierce era, they've been more focused defensively, where our team, I think, was just as good, if not better defensively, but not for the entire game. But when we picked our spots of when we were going to put our knuckles to the ground and just shut teams down.
It's interesting because NBA TV was showing all those old games for a month, and they had a Boston week. You watch those games from the mid-'80s. I wrote about this in my book, that the way half-court offenses were run back then, the whole goal was to get as close to the basket as possible. And it's almost like watching a hockey team on a power play where they're trying to jam the net and just get closer and closer. And when you watch those Celtics teams, that's what stands out is you and DJ. Basically, the teams were okay with you guys getting wide open 20-footers and threes because the other option was just getting torched by McHale and Bird, and they didn't know what to do. And now you think about the way the NBA is played now, and everything is about slash and kick, getting open threes, getting corner threes, stuff like that. What style do you think is more effective?
Right. Well, I think that, getting easy baskets, I think if Bird and McHale were still playing in today's game, they probably would still go to McHale because he was such a great high percentage low post scorer. And, Larry, as his career went on, I think the three became more of an emphasis. I remember it was in, I don't know if it was 86 or 87 where I, started shooting a lot of threes. And like I broke the record for most threes in a season, like at the All-Star break. And it became more of an emphasis. We started figuring out that three-point line wasn't there for decoration, that M.L. Carr had phrased like the year before. You're supposed to use that line. And, now it's just and then I think the next year Michael Adams made like 200 threes, and now you get guys making 200 every year and multiple players on teams. So, it's just become more and more of a focal point.
Yeah, I think Bird's career, the three, he started using it about midway through his career. His career would have, had he come along 20 years later, I think he probably would have fired up a lot more. Yeah, I don't want to start trouble with you and Magic Johnson, but I do a TV show with him, and we argue about the mid-'80s all the time. He thinks I'm on the team. I think I've actually convinced him that I was like the 13th man on the team. He says the 87. Go ahead.
I will say this, that, I have the most respect for those Laker teams. When anybody says, the Laker teams of 1987 or 85 or whatever year in the 80s was just as good as the Celtics in the 86, it's tough to argue. Those guys were great. I felt like we were actually better than them in 85, and they beat us, and I thought they were probably better than us in 84, and we won that series. So, those teams were such great teams. And I think that Byron Scott and James Worthy are two of the most underrated players in Laker history and maybe in NBA history. I think those guys were a lot better players than people realize because Magic did so much with the ball. Kareem was obviously one of the great scorers of all time. That was a powerhouse of a team as well. So it's tough to argue. And then you got Bob McAdoo and Michael Thompson and guys like that Michael Cooper coming off your bench. I think that's why the mid-'80s were so fun.
Well, just so you know, Magic says the Lakers beat the Celtics 2-1, but he doesn't count 86 in his math. And I was saying, like, you guys didn't show up in 86. That's a forfeit. He's like, no. We weren't there. We don't know what would have happened. I was like, but the Celtics showed up. You didn't show up. That's a forfeit. And he's for some reason doesn't count that. So I think at the very least it's 2-2.
You and I know what would have happened in 86.
Oh yeah.
We know what would have happened in 86. There's no way that Houston's beating us and Houston beat them.
Right.
And it was a special team and a special moment. And Magic knows the difference because Magic's played on. He had 5 championships, right?
Right.
So Magic knows, like, when you just know you're not going to lose. You know there's no way you're losing. And 86 more than any other of those teams, it was that way.
You played on that early 90s Blazers team that was so talented and just had a knack of just devastating losses and collapses. And when you look back at that group, like, what was missing with that team?
Well, I thought that I thought we were better than the Lakers the year the Lakers beat us
91.
in the Western Conference Finals. Yeah, that was a tough loss. But realistically, we got beat by a better team. The Bulls were better than us, and I mean, Michael was just ridiculous in that series in the finals, and he started making threes in that series in the finals.
Right.
And I'm not sure it was good for us that the whole media was making comparisons between Clyde Drexler and Michael Jordan. Michael said all the right things, but he went out to prove that he was by far the best player in the NBA. And
I think he's still mad about that. Probably 21 years later, he's still upset that anybody was arguing him versus Drexler. He's like, what? What else do I have to do?
Hey, Clyde was a great player and a great teammate, but he's not Michael. And nobody has been Michael. And, playing against him in 92 and 93, when I was with the Suns playing against Michael, I mean, he was more special than anybody I ever saw.
Yeah, it's interesting. You went against him in back-to-back finals for different teams. And the next year, in 93, now that was year Barkley, out of anybody who's gone against Michael in a series, Barkley kind of came the closest to matching him, tit for tat. And I had Barkley in the podcast like a year and a half ago, and he was talking about he really felt that year like he was as good as Jordan and maybe even better. And there was some game in the finals when he had like the greatest game he could have possibly had, and somehow Jordan was like, 1% better. And he just realized, like, oh my God, like this, I'm never going to be better than this guy. How close were you guys to winning that finals?
I'm not sure. It seemed like we struggled to score. Chicago reminded me a little bit of the teams like we had in the 80s with the Celtics, when it just sort of came down to shutting people down. Their defense was devastating, and we had a tough time scoring the ball throughout that whole series in the last 5-6 minutes of a game, and that made it difficult. And I don't know how close we were. I mean, obviously, I didn't sleep for 3 months after John Paxson hit that open three.
Right.
Just after telling our team, like, don't leave any 3-point shooters, and I instinctively thought I could get to Horace Grant and foul him before he hot potatoed the ball out to Paxson at the 3-point line. But, that series was, in every one of those games, we had trouble scoring down the stretch. And that's the sign of a great defensive team, a team that gets defensive stops in the last 5 minutes of the game.
Well, it also seems like Kevin Johnson got in his own head a little bit, especially in the first part of the series. He did not. I thought KJ was one of the best guards of that decade, and for whatever reason, it took him half the series to get going. I think he lost the first 2 at home, right?
Yeah, we lost the first 2 games at home. Yeah, those were tough. They were tough losses. KJ was a great player and a fantastic player.
Yeah, I feel like Kyrie Irving is the guy that reminds me of him. The way that KJ always seemed like he was going downhill. There was something about the way when his handle, and the other guy was always backpedaling at full speed, not knowing what was going to happen. And Kyrie Irving has a little bit of that. The next year in '94, that was the Mario Elie kiss shot. But that was the year you guys probably had a better chance to win the title that year because Jordan wasn't even in the league that year, right?
I thought the 2 years that we lost to Houston, we had leads on them. We had 2-0 or 3-1 leads both those years when Barkley went down both years with serious injuries. He played, but one was I think an abdominal muscle that he wasn't near the same player. We lost Danny Manning one year. Danny Manning was huge for us. I remember just sitting on the floor with my head between my legs when he went down that year. That was devastating, losing Danny Manning. And then Charles got hurt again that year also, after we had gotten the leads against Houston. So those two series losses were tough losses. I think those were Charles's best two chances, and he had two pretty serious injuries. And
maybe this Charles is all your fault.
Charles is not 100%. It was not going to be. We were not going to win.
Maybe this is all your fault. It just seems like injuries follow you with your teammates and your people wherever you go. I think maybe you need to have like some sort of injury exorcism. It's going back to
maybe so. I think injuries follow everybody. I mean, like that's just it's. You look at all the championship teams, and they've been fairly healthy. And, you look at Oklahoma City last year, losing Russell Westbrook, and we lose Rondo, and Chicago had the great years losing Derrick Rose. And, we almost got by Miami the year Bosch was hurt until Game 5. I mean, injuries play a big part every year, every playoffs. It's just part of it. And when you lose someone that's like you call a blue chipper, it's tough to overcome to win a championship.
Did you watch the 2013 finals?
I did, yeah.
Whoa,
I thought it was very entertaining.
It certainly was. When you watched San Antonio up 5, 28.2 left, are you thinking, I mean, I'm sure you're thinking like a GM a little bit, right? You're thinking if Miami loses this, are they going to blow it up? You're just assuming, you're already probably thinking ahead to what's going to happen this summer, right? Or you're just in the moment watching the game?
I'm in the moment watching the game. I mean, I understand that those things are fun to talk about, but, the blowing teams up are always if. It depends on what you can get and what opportunities are available. I think that just because they win, I think that knowing Pat Riley, he's not going to just sit there and not do anything and not try to get the team better. I think they're always trying to improve their team. And he's a very smart guy, and they've done a great job in Miami. And I think if they lose that game, if Ray Allen doesn't hit that three-point shot in the corner or get those offensive rebounds, but that's as devastating of championship losses I've seen San Antonio, because unlike ours was a Game 6 when I was in Phoenix, that was pretty devastating to us. But this was, it was over. They had the game in the bag, and it's like, 98% chance to win that game under the circumstances, and to lose. Those are tough losses to overcome. I don't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, it was incredible to be in the building for it. And it was interesting having the history with Ray. Even seeing him backpedaling, I mean, seriously, you would have bet anything that shot was going in, right?
Oh yeah, no. When he's in the air with a free look from the corner, yeah, I mean that's got to be a 60% shot.
Yeah, I would have been stunned if he missed that. Cuban said something interesting this summer. He was talking about he signed Monte Ellis and he signed Jose Calderon, and they're trying to keep the Mavericks a playoff team, and he was saying he thought there was market inefficiencies. Everybody who was going in the direction of rebuilding was trying to blow it up or potentially blow it up. And he felt like there was value in zigging when everybody else was zagging. Do you worry about if the Celtics go in that direction, there's 8 or 9 teams also trying to do what you would be trying to do?
Yeah, but we're in a different situation. I think that winning has always been a priority here. And, except for the year when we got the 5th pick in the draft and we had the second worst record when Paul Pierce was out for the season, where we focused on just playing our young guys to see what we really had. I understand what Mark Cuban's saying, and I think that they're, be interesting to see what they can do. They have an interesting team, and they did get some good players, and Calderon and Monte Ellis are terrific players. And adding them with Dirk Nowitzki, that's going to be really interesting to see what they can do. But there are a lot of teams out there that aren't interested in signing those kind of players just because it might make them too good.
You're not allowed to talk about this upcoming draft, right?
No.
Yeah, but needless to say, it's a pretty action-packed draft, and I think it's going to dominate a lot of the dialogue. What's happening? One thing I wanted to mention mention in the pod, you're working with your son now. Your son is part of the inner circle, right?
Austin has been part of our inner circle for 4 years.
Right.
Yeah, he coached the D League for 2 years, and then the Portland did all the scouting for us there, and then worked in the off season with us on personnel, and then became our director of player personnel 2 years ago. Yeah,
what's that like?
He plays a big part.
What's that like to be your son's boss?
I don't know. Austin and I have such a close relationship. Sometimes I think he's my boss. He's telling me what to do, but we have a great relationship, and we have a great front office. Mike Zarin and Austin and Dave Lewin and Ryan McDonough, who just left to go to Phoenix. Yep. We have great conversation, and it's a lot of fun. It's fun having my 2 grandsons live here. That's the highlight of having Austin here.
How many grandkids do you have now?
11.
Oh my God! And how many kids do you have? I forget. 6?
6 kids. Yeah.
6 kids, and you have
4 of them are married, and I have a son that's in Concepcion, Chile, serving a mission for the Mormon Church. He's just been there for 2 months, and then I have a 17-year-old son still at home.
Yeah, because I remember we used to sit near the wives section at the Celtic games in the 80s, and it seemed like every year there would be a new kid. Your wife was just multiple, and then Bill Walton had I don't know how many kids he had, but I remember young Luke Walton and a couple other ones. There was just all of a sudden there were all these kids in the wives section. Every year you had another one. Danny Ainge, this was a pleasure. It was fun talking. I totally forgot that. I forgot the back-to-back Michael Jordan finals things.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I really think you have to think about the injury exorcism, or maybe burning some sage in your office or something.
I think so. I don't know. We've had some good fortune too, but hopefully we'll be able to stay healthy this year and surprise some people.
All right, and just for the record, my dad is very fired up about Kelly Olynyk. He watched all the summer league and is convinced he's the next retired number. I'm trying to lower his expectations a little bit, but he's very excited about that pick.
Well, good. We have high expectations for Kelly, but I try to keep expectations real also. And he did look good in the summer league. He's been good in the workouts here. He's got to learn how to play defense and the defensive schemes, and hopefully he can develop a defensive game, and he sure knows how to play, and we're excited about him.
Did you hop up 3 picks because you were worried somebody else was going to grab him?
Yeah.
Figured. All right. Good luck with the season. Thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. And I will be watching, obviously. Take care.
Thanks, Bill. See ya.
So I get % off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.